Hello, it's Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter here. Just before Christmas last year, I started making a quilt for my brother made from Hawaiian shirts. And it's now the summer, it's mid-July, and I laughed and I said he'll probably end up with it finished by his birthday, and it's his birthday in mid-July. All of the blue fabric for this quilt have been reclaimed from shirt fabric that I bought from charity shops, and I've recycled that fabric. It's all 100% cotton, and it forms part of my fabric stash behind me. As you can see, I've got quite a lot of blue there. The white came from yardage. First of all, let me show you some of the Hawaiian shirts that I used in this quilt. In this one, I'm going to show you the completed quilt, and I'm going to particularly talk to you about things that helped me to try and achieve the completion of this in living alone. I haven't got a second pair of hands to help me with creating a quilt sandwich, and in particular, I haven't made a backing like this before. It was very heavy to do and to quilt on my domestic machine. I found it quite hard on my muscles, which is why it's taken so long, and it's probably the biggest quilt that I've made. Of course, you can make yours using this type of pattern, making as bright and bold of a Hawaiian shirt as you wish. I wanted to tone it down a little bit, but the brighter, the bolder, the better with Hawaiian shirts, or make it with Christmas shirts. Make it however you like. I'm going to use my ironing board to help me, and I want it as flat as I can make it. So I'm going to pull down the metal bar so that it's flat. I've now got the whole length of the ironing board to help me. I've pinned here and secured the batting starting at the top in line with the strip of fabric that you can see through the batting, which is the back strip on my quilt design. What I'm wanting is to get this seam hidden underneath that backing without creating a lot of bulk and without it moving. Now, even as we go along, you can see that with the pins in place, it starts to move, and I don't want that. What I want is to move it across and to be certain that when I next pick it up, it stays in place. So I'm going to leave it where it is on the ironing board for now. So I've got a large needle and thread, and I've started with a large knot at one end, and I'm actually doing large stitches and actually tacking down both edges over. So I'm sewing through the backing and the batting together, making sure I don't catch the fabric of the ironing board. I don't want to sew that into my quilt as well. Now, an ironing board will also grab onto your backing fabric, so that when I pull on this end, I can pull on the backing fabric and make sure it's taut. This is what a second person would normally do with you. Of course, the mother of invention makes you come up with ideas. Proof of the pudding is when I turn it over once I've taken the pins out, will it stay in place, and have I avoided getting any lumps, bumps and creases? Well, that worked. It doesn't seem lumpy at all. So I've hidden that join underneath. Now the other thing is I've got far too much wadding here, but I don't want to cut anything until I'm certain of how wide I need to cut it. I'm going to take it now to my bed and create the quilt sandwich. So I've laid this on my bed to pin it, and I can't do it all at once. So I've pinned it where I've left at least 2 inches either side. I've cut off some of the excess at one side, and I've made sure that I've got the seam going down the centre at the back, down this central piece here, approximately here. I'm hoping that it's straight. And I've used the bent pins to pin it in place all the way around down to row 5. I'm now going to roll this down the bed, making sure that it really is flat and I've got that back seam straight, and then I'm going to start pinning it again. This is how I cope with doing it, the pinning stage, creating this sandwich while I'm here alone. As I turn each section over, I make sure I smooth it out. I've got a coffee stain there. Look, I'm going to have to get that out, aren't I? Now I'm going to roll it over again and do the same. I go from the middle and push outwards. Excess that I have, I can now start to trim off. And you'll also notice that holding this batting in place, the pins are now on the outside, so they're easy for me to remove. The other thing I've checked is here in the middle where I've got the stripe. You can see where I joined my fabric together. If I turn over, I can see I've managed to get the stripe finished with some white edging before I come to the edge of the quilt. The edge of the quilt is there where my thumb is. Right, I'm pleased with that. I'm going to roll it all now, and then it's ready to take through to the kitchen. To quilt, I'm making some changes now to my sewing machine. I'm going to increase my stitch length to 3. And I'm using my walking foot. The other thing you'll see I've got on hand is when quilting, it generates a lot of lint. So I've got out my little lint brush because I'll need to keep this area around the needle clean and inside of this bobbin case free from lint. And let me show you where I intend to stitch. I'm going to stitch from the inside of the flying geese lines, and I'm going to start at the top here. I'm not going to go into the border, I'll do the border separately, and I'm going to stitch this side of the flying geese. If I stitch that line between each flying geese, that would give me a stitch line 3 inches apart. And although it's bulky, you'll see that there is plenty of room for this to fit into the throat of the machine. And you'll notice that I've actually pinned the edges in place on these 2 sausage rolls, as I've called them, and that's to stop it unravelling. It does take quite a bit of muscle power to help hold this in place and help guide it through, and I have a lot of weight on my lap. I'm going to start and end with a back stitch. It's important, as the fabric is going through the machine, that the quilt lies as flat as possible, and I open my hand like this, and I do it with both hands either side, and then let the machine guide it through. I can't hold the camera while I'm doing this. I need to show you what it looks like when I've done it. So far, I've quilted 3 inches apart along this line. That was a vertical line. I'm now going to prepare the quilt and roll it up ready for a horizontal line, and I'm going to do either side. No, I'm going to do one side of the top of the square and then right the way through the points, so that on the back the quilting at the moment is 3 inches apart. I will actually have a 3 inches apart square. That's enough for this batting. When folding, it's helpful if you leave yourself plenty of space here where the fabric can lie flat. And I folded where the quilting lines will meet, and that will help not only pulling, but it'll stop the fabric from twisting. Well, my quilting is now finished. As you can see, it creates a 3-inch square, and I've sewn on the white border too. I'm now at the stage where I'm going to cut off the excess batting and backing and square up those corners so that I can then add a trim, and from a trim I'm going to use navy bias binding. So on my binding, you can see I've started about a quarter of a way down the left side, and I've changed my thread to a navy and my stitch length now to a 2.5. All these ends I'm going to finish off while I'm sitting in my armchair. Wimbledon's on at the moment, so that'll be a nice sit down job. Right, let's get stitching here. For the best advice on how to create mitered corners in your binding, I recommend watching Tracy from the Sewing Channel. She's got a short video. It'll help make your sewing an awful lot simpler, and it's easy to follow and achieve good results. Now everything is secure and I've finished the last bit of stitching on the machine, I can remove the tacking stitches that are showing on the back. I now need to bury all those loose threads between the layers, and because there are so many of them, I recommend using one of these self-threading needles. It'll make life an awful lot easier. I finish off my binding on the back with a slip stitch, which doesn't show through on the front. This navy bias binding as a trim really frames the quilt. And so here's the final quilt. It now measures 60 by 78 inches and it is quite heavy. I've added the borders, which hope I reflect the flying geese pattern design, and on the trim I've mitered the edges. Let's go in a little bit closer and take a look at the style and the pattern and the design. I'm really pleased how it's turned out. You can see how the quilting is simple but effective on the flying geese, into the corners with the border and the mitered. Can you see the mitered corners? Can you see the mitered corners there? On the backing, 3 inches apart quilting is simple but effective. I will show you the reverse of the quilt as well. Because that reflects the pattern and the design. And because it's made for a loved one, as usual, I put my own stamp on it because it's been made with love. I'll gift it with a gift card, colour catchers and instructions on when and how it was made and how to care for it. But for now, this is a belated Christmas present cum birthday present from my brother. So for Malcolm, happy Christmas, happy birthday. I hope you, the parrot and the macaw, really enjoy some happy times under this Hawaiian shirt flying geese quilt. His wife's birthday the week after, so I'll have to make another quilt in a different design for her. Come back and join me again soon for more quilting and crafting and fabric sewing ideas, won't you? This is Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter. Bye.